So our next speaker is Akil. As he mentioned, he's a physician who practices integrative medicine, and he blends his conventional medical experience and education with evidence-based holistic approaches, which include functional medicine and Ayurveda. He studied biochemistry at Harvard and completed his medical training here at UCSF and also at Stanford. He then did a fellowship with Dr. Andrew Weil through the University of Arizona. He currently practices at Sutter Health Institute for Health and Healing here in San Francisco. He is the author of the book, The Ayurvedic Diet. It's a complete program to burn fat, increase energy, and reverse disease. This was just released last month. And please join me in welcoming Dr. Palanisamy.
Okay, thank you so much, Karen, for the introduction. And I just want to respond to the question about insurance, because our clinic does accept insurance. There are clinics out there. The UCSF has a clinic, the Osher Center for Integrative Medicine. Our clinic accepts insurance, most insurances. We also have a scholarship program for people without insurance. So if people who are indigent, I treat a lot of people who are unfortunately without insurance, but we're able to provide care to them as well. So there are slowly more and more options out there, and I'm really trying to work within the current system. Sutter Health is a really huge network that provides care in 100 different cities in California, and the fact that they have an integrative medicine center is, I think, a testament to change within medicine. So just let's keep the hope there that we can change the system from within and without. So the topic of my talk is the Paleo-Vedic approach, which is basically my approach to health. So I'm first and foremost a clinician seeing patients. So my talk is going to have a real clinical focus. The first half will go into cases and really talk about how I use paleo and my approach with patients. And then the second half will focus a lot on nutrition and really get into the micronutrients. So this is, in a nutshell, my approach and the summary of my talk as well. We're going to focus on each of these different components. So my foundation is really a customized, nutrient-dense paleo diet. And the reason I wrote my book is basically because I see a lot of people who are on a paleo diet, but not necessarily individualizing it for themselves or realizing that they need to do that. And I think the customization is really important, and I've found that Ayurveda, which is the other thing I'm really passionate about, can help people customize a diet for themselves. And I think using the ancient wisdom of Ayurveda to really personalize your diet and lifestyle for your body type is something that I found very helpful for my patients. So before we talk about exactly what that means, I want to present a few cases from my practice. So this was a patient who I saw a couple of years ago. She was a nurse at the hospital, California Pacific Medical Center, and for about 9 months she had been suffering from increasing fatigue, constipation. She had gained about 15 pounds and was very fatigued, and she had been on a paleo diet for about 9 months when she came to see me. I did some blood work checking her thyroid, and TSH, which is a thyroid stimulating hormone, was slightly elevated, and the normal reference range is actually officially 0.5 to 4.5, but even within medicine, the American Association for Clinical Endocrinologists has started to revise that downward to 0.3 to 3. So technically she would be slightly out of that range with her current value. And a lot of conventional doctors often stop there with just the TSH as a measure of thyroid hormone, but we at the IHH do more testing, so we looked at her free T4 and her free T3. So these are two of the individual hormones made by the thyroid. thyroid mostly makes T3, which is then converted into, makes mostly T4, which is then converted into T3. So her free T4 was just slightly low normal. She did have elevated thyroid peroxidase antibodies, which leads to the diagnosis of Hashimoto's disease, which is an autoimmune disease where the body attacks the thyroid gland. Her free T3 was outside of the normal range, as well as her total T3. But she had been told by her primary care physician that that was not really significant. So she was referred to an endocrinologist, who then told her that at this time there's not much that we can do for you, but when your thyroid gets worse, then we can prescribe you thyroid medication. And she was not satisfied. So then she came to me, and so she did not really want to go on, sometimes we prescribe natural alternatives for thyroid hormones such as Armour Thyroid or Nature Thyroid. She did not really want to go on any medications yet. She wanted to work on, diet and possibly herbs and supplements. So hold that thought. We'll come back to her in a little bit. Second patient, I see a lot of Silicon Valley, employees. So this is a gentleman in a software startup who had ulcerative colitis, and he had been having a fair amount of loose stools. So ulcerative colitis is a type of inflammatory bowel disease. He had been having bowel movements with blood and mucus for about a year, and despite being paleo for the past 1 year, he had reduced his symptoms by about 20%, but he was still having, a lot of the symptoms. This was his diet, essentially. Eggs, meat, vegetables, fermented dairy, fruits, and mostly almonds and walnuts. He was not eating any grains, no gluten, and no legumes. He was on this medication called mesalamine, which is a prescription anti-inflammatory, but he still had elevated C-reactive protein, which is one of the markers of inflammation. He did not want to initiate other medications, so there's a class of drugs called biologics, which are modulators of the immune system, more towards suppressing the immune system. His gastroenterologist recommended Remicade, but he was not quite ready to do that, and so he's the second case. And finally, this was a patient of mine who, very sweet housewife who had 3 kids and was at home with them. She had been struggling with constipation that was chronic and migraine headache for about 3 years. And she was having these migraines every month. They were not really menstrual migraines. She was taking triptans, which are the conventional medication that was relieving them pretty well, but she was getting them every month. And it was not uncommon for her to go 4 or 5 days without a bowel movement, and they were, quite small and hard. And she had been told by her doctors to really hydrate, so she was trying to drink a lot of water and eating salads every day. She also was on a paleo diet, but she was taking Miralax, which is a medication that helps with constipation. So before we talk about how I approached these 3 patients, I want to just give a brief background about Ayurveda. So what would be helpful for me is to see with a show of hands how many people are somewhat familiar with Ayurveda. Wow, I'm in the right place. Just curious, how many people have seen an Ayurvedic practitioner or worked with an Ayurvedic therapist? Okay, wow, wonderful. All right, great. So I'll move through this pretty quickly then. Ayurveda is a system that we know dates back, at least 3,000 years, between 4,000 to 5,000, depending on who you ask. And the word itself is from Sanskrit, ayu meaning life, and Veda meaning science. And so it's literally the science of life. And Ayurveda emphasizes diet and nutrition, in a really fundamental way, as reflected in this quotation. So when diet is wrong, medicine is of no use. But when diet is right, medicine is of no need. So I think that, if we can all get our diets and lifestyles optimal, and then, doctors are out of business, I would be very happy to retire as a coconut farmer with, with Rob. And I'd be very happy if, there was really no need for doctors anymore. So the Ayurvedic philosophy really comes from the five-element concept, which it shares with Chinese medicine. And Ayurveda really believes that your body can heal itself. And that's something I believe when any patient walks in the door, is that they can get better. And you'd be surprised how many patients tell me that I'm the first doctor who's told them that they could get better. Because unfortunately, it's not something that people hear a lot from their doctors, depending on their condition. And Ayurveda really emphasizes individuality, that every person has a unique body type, and that the diet should be customized accordingly. So we talked about the five elements, which in Ayurveda are space, air, fire, water, and earth. And these elements combine to form what are called doshas, which are the three forces in the body that are responsible for all health and disease. And when these doshas are in balance, then essentially you're healthy. Let's talk a little bit more about the three doshas. So every person is born with a unique combination of vata, pitta, and kapha. And these doshas have both positive and negative associations. So when you're in balance, every person has a unique strength or area where they excel, as a result of their dosha. But when they're out of balance, that can lead to a predisposition to disease. So we'll start with vata, which you can roughly think of as wind. And vata is the energy that governs movement, the respiration, anything which involves movement in the body. And Ayurveda is a qualitative science, so it really focuses on the qualities. So if you just think about the qualities of wind, it's light, cold, dry, and mobile. So those are the qualities of a person who has a dominant vata body type. And I'm grossly oversimplifying here, and but just to kind of illustrate some of the ideas that are here. But on a simplistic level, that's what you can think of it, with Ayurveda and vata. And when vata people are balanced, they're extremely creative, often artistic, very rapid on their feet. But when they get into imbalance, they tend towards more of anxiety, restlessness, nervousness, that sort of thing. Okay, so the next dosha is pitta, which is fire, and pitta is associated with metabolism, digestion, and it has all the qualities of fire. So it's hot, sharp, and intense. And in Ayurveda, fire is associated with the digestion. So there's a concept known as Agni, which is the digestive fire, and strong Agni is the foundation of health. And Ayurveda believes that all disease starts in the gut, usually with an imbalance in Agni, or digestive fire. These are some of the associations with Pitta dosha, or fire. And lastly, we come to kapha, which is the combination of water and earth. So kapha is the force that provides, structure, stability. It's associated with all the structural components of the body. It has the qualities of earth, more dense, heavy, slow, and cool. And these are some of the emotional associations. And so, every one of us has all three of the doshas. We all have kapha, or we wouldn't, have our body structure and body fat. We all have pitta for digestion and focus, and the vata governs our heartbeat and respiration. So everybody has all three of these doshas. This talks a little bit more about the qualities, which is the big part of Ayurvedic science, is the qualities of each of the doshas. So basically, with Ayurveda, we're trying to reestablish the original levels of the three doshas. So a common misconception is people think I want equal amounts of all three, but that's not the goal. You're not trying to get 33% of each dosha. You're trying to get back to your true nature. That's essentially what Ayurveda is trying to do, and that's different for every person based on your unique body type. And what causes the imbalance of doshas is, all the things which are part of our modern lifestyle. Diet, changes in our diet, lifestyle, isolation, which I think is one of the biggest epidemics in the United States today, chronic stress, environmental toxins, which we're all exposed to at a chronic low level, and then, of course, genetic predisposition can affect that as well. And in Ayurveda, every disease is also individualized, so that 5 people with asthma may receive 5 distinct treatment programs depending on their subtype of asthma, depending on their unique body type, depending on the season, depending on what environment they're living in. So the customization is really one of the strengths of Ayurveda. So returning to our case, our nurse who's working in the hospital, so just to refresh your memories, she had the fatigue and the low thyroid hormone. So I diagnosed her with subclinical hypothyroidism based on her, elevated TSH and other hormone abnormalities. And I looked at her from an Ayurvedic perspective, and she had very clearly excess kapha. So her body, her pulses, her tongue, her history, everything was consistent with excess of kapha. And since she did not want to try any type of medication, I put her on a kapha-reducing diet, which essentially has all the qualities of foods that are opposite to kapha. So kapha is heavy, cool, and slow. So the kapha-reducing diet has foods that are in opposite, very light, warmer foods. I won't get into too much detail just because of time, but I also talked about how to increase the strength of her Agni, because she had a very weak Agni, which in Ayurveda, Agni, I mentioned, is related to metabolism, and the thyroid is also one of the controllers of metabolism, so it's no surprise that a lot of people with thyroid issues have a weak Agni or digestive fire. And then I recommended an herb called ashwagandha. How many people have heard of ashwagandha? Wow, that's almost everybody. Okay. So I recommended the herb at this dosage for her, and then I rechecked her labs in 3 months. I had her, follow the diet as best as she could. She was not really able to exercise because of her lack of energy, so I didn't have her exercise. But after 3 months, her thyroid T3 levels improved. They were outside the normal range, and they came up to 3.0, and her TSH, did decline as well. Ashwagandha is actually very powerful for the thyroid, and I just want to say that I see a lot of people who come into me, already taking ashwagandha, and I would just advise caution with that, because it's best to work with a practitioner who's supervising you, because ashwagandha is always recommended for a certain time course, not to be on for your whole life. And there are some cases of hyperthyroidism in the literature from people who were taking ashwagandha because it stimulated their thyroid so much that they became hyperthyroid. So in her case, it worked exactly the way we wanted. She lost about 10 pounds, and then was able to start exercising because her energy had returned, and then she continues to do well, without any medication. Her thyroid numbers have stayed within the, this normal range, and then she's noticed, significant improvement in her energy and her weight. So she was quite pleased. So the second case is the software engineer with ulcerative colitis. So in his case, you recall that he was already on the paleo diet, and but this was his diet: a lot of meat, eggs, vegetables, fermented dairy, and nuts. And for him, I diagnosed him with excess pitta, which is the fire dosha, and pitta is correlated with inflammation, so it makes sense that somebody with inflammatory bowel disease, does have pretty high pitta. But Ayurveda would argue that actually he was eating a lot of foods that have a hot quality, and for somebody who has a lot of fire, that's not the best idea. And so even though meat, eggs, and fermented dairy are very nutrient dense and good for a lot of people, in his case they were actually not appropriate. And so I had him take those out of his diet and really switch to a lot more greens and steamed veggies and the bitter greens, which are considered really the most cooling foods in Ayurveda, to reduce the pitta that he had. And I also encouraged him to incorporate turmeric, very liberally. And at 3 months, he actually reported that the blood and mucus had resolved, and he was still having, about 4 bowel movements per day, but that was a 50% reduction. And then we continued working with him, using different dietary changes, reintroducing some foods, incorporating other herbs and spices, and he was able to, after 1 year, wean off of the mesalamine and remain primarily diet controlled. So this is an example of a person who, was on a paleo diet, but Ayurveda was really able to help customize the diet and tweak it so that he was able to get a lot more benefits for his unique situation. And finally, the patient who had chronic constipation and migraine headaches. So she had been drinking lots of, iced water and salads every day. So and she was very clearly having excess vata, which was very evident, in her pulse and her tongue and her history. And in her case, she'd been trying to hydrate, but she was having all this iced water. And any of you who's seen an Ayurvedic practitioner will know that iced water is kind of a no-no. Basically, either room temperature or warm water is recommended. And also the salads, which are very healthy for most people, for somebody with a vata imbalance, are actually contraindicated. This person should not be really eating raw food at all. So I recommended that she switch to a vata pacifying diet, which has a lot of warm, heating foods, a lot of soups and stews, completely cutting out the raw foods and the salads, and cutting out the iced water, and then incorporating a lot more fat. So in Ayurveda, constipation is considered a vata issue, and mostly an issue of dryness. And so she incorporated a lot more of the good fats like ghee and avocado and for some time as well, sesame oil in her diet. And she reported that her constipation resolved after, this was 3 months, and she was able to go off her Miralax, and also had a significant reduction in her migraine headaches. So this was another case where Ayurveda was able to provide a unique perspective for somebody who was already on a paleo diet, and just not realizing that some of the choices they were making were actually doing them some harm. But after some simple changes, were able to really notice quite a remarkable difference. So in terms of understanding your Ayurvedic body type, I have a questionnaire in my book which has a 20-item checklist that you go through, and it evaluates all your physical and mental qualities. And a lot of people ask me about the physical aspect, the ectomorph, mesomorph, and endomorph, which are the physical body types. And there definitely is a correlation. That's part of the questionnaire. There's 2 questions out of the 20 that talk about your physical structure and those kind of things. But the body types go a lot more beyond just your the ectomorph versus endomorph into your digestion, your mental and emotional qualities. So that's where the body types are really more than just physical. And in my case, I've tried to really incorporate the ancestral and evolutionary perspective for the Ayurvedic recommendations and the body type. And every person with a certain body type we know is predisposed to different types of diseases based on which dosha is most likely to go out of balance. So if you're somebody who has primarily vata dosha, Ayurveda would state that you're more prone to have vata disorders, and so the recommendations are tailored to kind of prevent that imbalance from happening. Okay, so that's the first part in terms of talking about the customization using Ayurveda. Now we're going to come back and really hone in on these two words here, which are nutrient dense, and really go into some specifics about how to maximize the nutrients in your diet. So when we're talking about nutrients, I'm really talking about micronutrients, and there are two categories, vitamins and minerals and phytochemicals. And my philosophy about increasing dietary micronutrients is to choose the most nutrient-dense fruits and vegetables, which we'll talk about, and incorporate spices, which are incredibly nutrient-dense. And we know that this is a pretty important issue because studies, when they've looked at Americans nationwide, more than 50% of people are deficient in pretty important vitamins and minerals, and about 33% of people are also deficient in other B vitamins. And so we know that nutrient deficiency is a pretty widespread problem. And then studies show that a high intake of phytochemicals through fruits and vegetables is correlated with the lower levels of all the diseases of civilization. So, heart disease, diabetes. So, learning how to maximize your phytochemical intake, I think, can really help protect against all the diseases that are killing us today. So, I think it's really worth paying attention to the micronutrients in your foods, and also it appears that the vitamins and minerals and the phytochemicals have synergistic and additive effects within fruits and vegetables. So Ayurveda really believes in whole foods, and vitamins and minerals in food are pretty complex structures and very different from supplements. So when you see a food that's fortified, you always want to first ask, why does this food have to be fortified in the first place, So let's take an example, vitamin E. So when you look at the whole food source of vitamin E, it has 4 tocopherols and 4 tocotrienols. So when you're getting vitamin E in almonds or olive oil or papaya, you're getting all of these components, and all of these components are part of the vitamin E complex, which is a very important fat-soluble vitamin, and greater than 50% of Americans are not getting enough vitamin E. But if you look at a typical vitamin E supplement, I just pulled a label here, it's D-alpha tocopherol. So this is, according to the FDA, vitamin E. So for a consumer who's just going to the store and getting a vitamin E supplement, this is probably what they're going to get. It's often petroleum derived, and it does not have the same synergies of the whole complex that we talked about. But is that really a problem? Can supplements cause any harm? Well, the answer is yes, because with vitamin E, Johns Hopkins, there was a meta-analysis which found that high doses of that vitamin E can actually increase the risk of dying by 10%. And when we look at clinical studies, any effect that increases the risk of dying is considered a significant effect. So it's pretty clear. Same thing with vitamin A, which is often, according to the FDA, beta-carotene supplement can be called vitamin A, but 2 major studies have shown that beta-carotene supplements actually increase lung cancer among smokers. So my take-home is that we really should be getting most of your nutrients from food, but because so many people have nutrient deficiencies, get testing, with your functional medicine practitioner, and then appropriate supplements have a place under supervision. And be especially careful with supplementing these supplements here, which, all supplements have kind of a Goldilocks level where there's not too much or too little, and especially these. Iron deficiency is a rampant problem, but also iron overload has, really harmful effects. Same with calcium. We used to tell everybody to take calcium supplements to prevent osteoporosis, and then, that's changed now, and we're emphasizing people get calcium from food. We talked about vitamins A and E, and vitamin D is one of the hot topics right now. We're going to have a whole presentation on vitamin D later in the afternoon. So coming specifically into the topic of nutrient density, so from the evolutionary perspective, the foods that we evolved to eat really had much higher levels of phytochemicals, but they were also not as palatable. They were smaller, more fibrous, less sweet. And scientists believe that up to 40,000 different phytochemicals are going to be discovered, and there's some of them listed here, and we are just not really getting what we used to out of our fruits and vegetables. And the entire rest of my talk, I'm just going to be focusing on fruits and vegetables. We know that organ meats are really nutrient dense and other foods, but I just want to get into this a little more. So there's a very interesting paper that looked at apples. So the evolution of apples over the years, wild apples were pretty small. The modern crab apples are closer to those, so they tend to have a long stem and are pretty small. And then we've developed these, much larger, sweeter, more productive apple trees. So scientists looked at 321 species of apples, and there's over 8,000 different varieties of apples. But in this study, among the 321 species that were analyzed, their statement was, I quote, "Collection was found to be very diverse in total phenolics and antioxidants." So, but how significant is that? So if you take 1 ounce of wild apples, in your left hand, and have 1 ounce of ginger gold apples, this is a picture of one of the top-selling apples in the United States, what would be the percent nutrient difference? So maybe if you could just shout it out, any ideas? 50%, okay, well, let's keep going, keep going higher. 85, no, 90, no, keep going higher. 99. No, you can go above 100. All right, keep going on until we get to the answer, come on. More than 100%. 125, no. 200, no, higher. 10,000, higher than 10,000. Okay, do I hear 20? Do I hear 30? No. No, it's less than 1 million. So 47,500. So that was the difference between the most nutritious apples and then your ginger gold apple, that's what we're getting. That's what we're eating today. So this is our food. And Americans, we have this uncanny ability to choose the least nutrient-dense options, and yeah, I'm not talking about McDonald's or fast food. I'm talking about fruits and vegetables. But iceberg lettuce, which is the most popular green in the country, it's so crisp and refreshing, but it doesn't really have much else. And potatoes, and I'm nothing against potatoes, but about 50% of this is actually consumed in the form of French fries, which is where the problem comes from. And then bananas and pears. And whenever I give this talk, people ask me, what do I have against bananas? And the answer is nothing. I don't really have anything against bananas. I mean, it's much better than if you were, going to eat at a fast food place. But besides being a source of potassium, the bananas you get in the store today are very different from the wild bananas that, like for example, in India, you could go to a store and see 12 different kinds of bananas, and when was the last time you saw 12 different kinds of bananas in a store? Probably never. So we're going to talk about very specific details, how to maximize the phytochemical intake. So a very simple rule is that the more deeply and intensely colored a plant is, the more phytonutrients it contains. And you've all heard this concept of eating the rainbow, getting all the different colors, and each of these colors is associated with different phytochemicals, and that's what gives it the color. So basically, trying to get the most deeply colored fruits that you can, or vegetables, would really help. And then most of a plant's antioxidants, which are part of its defense mechanisms, are in the skin and just below the surface. So let's look at this avocado. So antioxidants are how a plant defends itself. So what do plants have to defend themselves against? Right. So yeah, pests, sunlight, which is the UV light, insects, etc. So the antioxidants are basically produced right on the skin. So when you look at this avocado, you see that just below the skin on any avocado, there's an area which is much more dark green than the rest of the avocado, and that area actually has more antioxidants than the rest of the flesh. So just be sure that you scrape those avocados, the skin, clean, and definitely have all of that component of the avocado. In terms of skins, that holds true for most other, for example, potatoes, sweet potatoes, apples. Most of the antioxidants are really in the skin because that's where the plant needs to defend itself. So we're keeping in mind this idea about defense mechanisms, we're going to move on to lettuce. And so can people tell me what kind of lettuce this is here? Romaine, yeah. And so romaine is a very good option, better than the iceberg lettuce, and it's much higher in vitamins and minerals as well as phytochemicals. And a simple trick which works with any kind of lettuce is something called lettuce wounding. So in Ayurveda, we believe that every plant is alive, and I think that's a fact. But every food is actually still alive. So when you bring some lettuce home, it's actually respiring. It's taking in, exchanging oxygen and carbon dioxide. It's breathing. It's slowly dying. But so lettuce wounding. So researchers took lettuce, and this is a simple trick. You just get a full head of lettuce and tear it up into pieces. So basically, you just tear it up. You tear each leaf into maybe 3 or 4 pieces, and the next day, the phytonutrient content will be doubled, and that works for any kind of lettuce. Basically. You're wounding the lettuce, and so the plant thinks that it's under attack, and it produces this burst of phytochemicals, and then you can benefit from then eating that lettuce. So here are some other good alternatives to iceberg lettuce. So radicchio has about 4 times the phytochemicals of iceberg lettuce. With arugula, that peppery finish is actually a reflection of some very health-promoting compounds. And loose leaf lettuce is actually also a better option nutritionally than the iceberg lettuce. So cabbage is the world's most popular vegetable, but that's green cabbage. Red cabbage is actually not, as popular, but this is from my local supermarket, and red cabbage has about 6 times the antioxidants of green cabbage, so it's an easy way to just get more nutrients out of cabbage. And then we have a really great farmers market in Dublin where I live, and this was at the local farmers market. So remember the rule about more intensely colored vegetables, but in this case, cauliflower is actually an exception because white cauliflower is still extremely healthy and a great option even though it's white. It's a rich source of cancer-fighting compounds and glucosinolates, but the purple cauliflower has 3 times the number as the white cauliflower. So sweet potatoes, so regular potatoes, nothing against them, but sweet potatoes have more antioxidants, they're lower glycemic, between sweet potatoes, the green-fleshed variety actually has more phytochemicals than the white-fleshed variety, which, by now you should all know that rule, and so that's an easy choice. You just, if you can, go with the green sweet potatoes. And what is the most nutritious? Oh, orange. Sorry, orange. Yeah. Thanks. Yeah. Okay. Yes. So, all right. So, but what is the most nutritious part of the sweet potato? Skin. Right. Exactly. Okay, and then at my local Asian market, I found these purple sweet potatoes, which have a really complex flavor. A lot of people compare them to wine. They're really so delicious. And among sweet potatoes, those are the kings and queens of the sweet potato family in terms of phytochemicals and antioxidants. Garlic, another incredibly health-promoting food which has over 100 different phytochemicals. And allicin in garlic is actually made when two substances in garlic that are normally separate are mixed together. And mixing can take any form, so a garlic press, crushing the garlic, or mincing it. But the key thing is you have to allow the time for the allicin to be synthesized, and it takes about 10 minutes or so. And once it's synthesized, it's relatively heat stable, so then you can saute or cook the garlic, and then most of the allicin will still be intact. So this is another way to get more out of a food that you're probably using every day already. Okay, talking about onions here. So what is the most nutritious onion on this slide? What was that, the red onion? No? Not the blossoms. No, actually the scallions, yeah. So the reason why is that scallions have somehow survived as being very close to how wild onions used to be. So the bulbs used to be this small, and then they've been bred to become very large and sweet. But scallions and green onions are have 140 times the level of antioxidants as white onions. So it's again a huge difference in terms of phytochemicals, and the greens are richer in antioxidants than the root. So most people use green onions in as a dressing, and that's a really good way to use them. Just incorporating more of them in your diet is a great way. And also red onions are definitely more nutrient dense than white onions, but scallions would be the most nutritious form of onion. Okay, and then tomatoes. So what is the best or the high, which food, or what is the best source of lycopene on this slide? The can, yes, yeah. So we talked about the rule of small, being better, because the grape and cherry tomatoes are closer to how wild tomatoes, used to be. And then, but this goes back to one of the issues about, certain vegetables are better for you cooked, and certain vegetables are better for you raw. So with tomatoes, it's definitely the case that the cooked are preferable. And the reason is that when you heat tomatoes, the cell wall is broken down and the lycopene becomes a lot more bioavailable. And then heating also changes the isomer from a cis to a trans lycopene, which is a lot better absorbed. So in two ways, heating and cooking tomatoes makes them a lot more nutritious. And so tomato sauce or tomato paste is actually a very rich source of lycopene. And within these cherry tomatoes, the scientists have actually found that the rule about smaller being more nutritious applies within the same class. So, for example, within all of these cherry tomatoes, the smaller ones have slightly more phytochemicals than the bigger ones. So, in this slide, I would say, if you were picking these at a farmer's market, I would go with this one, and you'd probably be better off than this one, and I think the flavor is actually better for the smaller cherry tomatoes than the bigger one, and then you can use all those tomatoes and make a tomato sauce or tomato paste using the small or great cherry tomatoes, and that would be a way to really maximize your phytochemicals from tomatoes. So we're getting close to the end of my talk, and then we'll have time for questions, but I want to just briefly touch on the other components of my approach. So detoxification is something which I really emphasize, and Ayurveda is really huge on detoxification. And I just want to mention one food which is one of my favorite foods, which I talk about in my book, the simple beet. And this was something I found at my local supermarket, and often you might see beets without the greens, but if you can get the greens, that's actually the best part of the beetroot, because the greens have the greens are much richer in antioxidants than the root. The root is no slouch. I mean, the root has 50 times more antioxidants than orange carrots. The greens support methylation, which is a very important process in the body that affects many different functions, detoxification and mood. There's anti-inflammatory nutrients. There's a unique phytochemical called betalain, which is not available in any other food, which is cancer-fighting. And then the nitrates in beets are being studied for enhancing athletic performance. So, some athletes are now drinking beet juice. I count myself one among them. So, just to finish up, I also really emphasize, periodic, more intensive detoxification, but I think, that should be ideally done working in conjunction with a practitioner. And then the last thing that I want to talk about is spices. And, spices are among the most nutrient-dense foods on the planet. And remember, in Ayurveda, I said all disease starts in the gut. And spices are very helpful for gut health and for digestion. And, some of the richest sources of antioxidants that are out there, a lot of anti-inflammatory compounds. More and more research showing that they help with blood sugar issues, metabolic issues, and maintaining a healthy weight. So these are what I call the kitchen pharmacy, which I think every kitchen should have, which are these spices here. So how many people have heard about turmeric? Okay. Well, I think everybody's heard about turmeric, yes. But, you'd be surprised that actually, ginger and cinnamon have been studied for anti-inflammatory effects that are almost on par with turmeric. And fenugreek is one of the spices that's the most helpful for blood sugar, for metabolic issues, for weight. And it's something which you don't hear about, but, it's incredibly powerful. With cloves, there was actually a very interesting study which looked at people who ate a small amount of cloves, like a cooking amount, eighth of a teaspoon, every day for 7 days. And at the end of 7 days, they actually had measurable reductions in markers of inflammation in their blood after 7 days of eating cloves. And what I like about that study was that they used cooking quantities. And that speaks to the point that you don't need to take a supplement. What's really the best is just daily incorporation of spices and really adding them into your foods. So my book does include 53 recipes, which were provided by Sharon Mayer, who's one of our nutritionists at the institute where I work. And so that's something which I hope you'll incorporate more spices into your diet. And last slide, this is a picture of my daughter, Alicia. And I just want to remind everybody that, healthy eating should be fun. And I learned a lot from Alicia in that, whenever she eats a food, it's like she's eating it for the first time. And, in some cases it is that she's eating it for the first time. But even when it's not, she just uses her senses. She really looks at it. She smells it. She, rolls it around on the floor. She, she's really, really understanding and experiencing her food. And here she is with a pomelo, which we got. And so I just want to remind everybody that, we should really not forget the other aspects of cooking, the social aspects, the enjoying meals together with other people, and the cooking and preparing food. And so thanks for your time, and I'll take some questions.
Yes, hello. My name is Sanjay Schweig. I'm a functional medicine specialist in Berkeley. Thank you, Akil, for your talk. It was wonderful. Thank you also so much for all your help yesterday. I really appreciate it. So the question I had, just briefly, if you could touch on the protein sources within Ayurvedic, and I haven't read your book yet. I'm very excited to do that. But I know Ayurvedic medicine does not always recommend a lot of meat, and that's frequently a foundation, obviously, with paleo. So I was wondering how you're juxtaposing that if you could touch on that.
Yeah, that's a great question, Shunya. And I think, in Ayurveda, it's, again, very much individualized. So it's believed that certain body types do need animal protein and meat in their diet, and other body types, it's better for them, not to have too much meat. So, for example, I talked about the case of the patient who had a lot of pitta or inflammation, and in that body type, it's recommended to have less meat. And somebody with a lot more vata is recommended to have animal protein in their diet. So Ayurveda definitely, like all things, customizes that question as well, and really relates it back to the body type. Yeah.
What do you recommend for protein sources for patients who don't recommend a lot of animal protein as well?
Yeah, so I think, if they are able to tolerate legumes and properly, prepare them and soak them, I think that's an excellent source. And then same with dairy products and eggs as well. So those are some of the sources. Yeah, thanks. Okay, go ahead.
Hi there, my name's Christopher Kelly. Thank you for your presentation, it was great. I was a lot like case number 2 a few years ago, and I went to Sutter and had an experience that was horrifying enough for me to quit my job as a software engineer and start a new business in functional medicine.
Wow.
And I'm wondering
Great.
when...
Glad that we could help.
Yeah, well... yeah, I'm just wondering... obviously the experience I had at Sutter was not the experience that you just described, and so I'm wondering, when's this going to be the standard of care at Sutter, and it not be a kind of a niche within an organisation?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and I'm sorry about your experience earlier, but, within Sutter, we now have 4 locations in San Francisco, Marin, Santa Rosa, and Sacramento, and then we, possibly down to the South Bay. So I think there's definitely a shift, and more and more physicians within Sutter are really open to integrative medicine, and it's a very slow process. I think progress in medicine is really measured in decades or centuries, and so I think hopefully decades. But so I think it is very slowly shifting, and anytime you're welcome to come to our clinic, and I can show you kind of what is within Sutter right now. So
I wish I had. I just didn't know. At the time, I didn't know anything about it.
Yeah, marketing is really terrible.
Well, thank you. I appreciate what you're doing. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Hi, my name is Kitty Wells, and my company is Spice Farm, so I really appreciate your emphasis on spices. And my question, I personally cook with tons of spices, but very, very few Americans do. And it's unlikely to change that much, even though people are using more spices. I'm curious to think of what you think about supplements and the ones that are the extracts, like curcumin rather than turmeric, or extracts of cinnamon for diabetes, and using supplements that are based on spices.
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think, for example, with turmeric, I think it's clear that the spice itself is not very well absorbed unless you're combining it with black pepper and fat. That really increases absorption. But turmeric as a supplement is a lot more effective for inflammation and and getting into the joints. So I think those are really excellent options, the spice extracts. But I think I recommend working with a practitioner of some type to guide people, because they may not know which spice or for how long to take something. I would also recommend not taking them indefinitely, but taking them for a particular reason or a particular time course. But I think that's a great option.
Now so many people are taking curcumin just all the time. Do you think they're doing themselves any harm?
Well, I think turmeric and curcumin is, is pretty safe relative to most supplements. I think there is an issue because it thins the blood to some extent. So if you're having surgery or procedure, you definitely want to get off all your supplements in at least 2 weeks before, but especially turmeric. Okay.
I had just a question for you about, my name is Charlene.
Okay.
A question about insurance. You say you take insurance. How did you get the insurance company to accept the different naturopathic and pay you for it? Rather.
Services, yeah.
Services.
No, that's a good question. I think I mean, Sutter Health is a big entity. You know, we're talking like 10 billion in revenues every year amongst all of their centers. So we like that we're sort of buried deep within that. And you know, all the billing is done by Sutter, and basically we've started within the insurance model for 25 years ago. So we have a lot of experience in terms of working with insurances, and you know, a lot of insurances now cover the acupuncture that we offer. We have a chiropractor, and sometimes he's covered. So I think it's very slow, but we are seeing some shifts with insurance acceptance. Yeah.
Hi, my name's Christina Hickey, and I'm actually here for personal reasons, although I am a psychotherapist that works with the body. My question is, how would your approach, and you would deal with people who have reactions to nightshades, which are a big part of the, you know, the vegetable that you showed up there. So I'd be curious how you conceptualize it, and then how you would work with it.
Oh, yeah. That's a great question. Yeah, I think definitely there is a recognition within Ayurveda that nightshades are not appropriate for certain people, especially if they have a lot of pitta or the inflammation. So if you have an autoimmune condition or inflammatory condition, I would encourage, you know, trying a period of elimination. And with Ayurveda, the test of all things is experience. So I would recommend trying it for a couple of months and doing reintroductions, you know, working with a practitioner to see whether you might be reacting to those foods, but that's definitely a category that Ayurveda has some caution about.
And would you think that over time you might be able to become non-reactive to them again as you change your diet?
Yes, I mean, I think that definitely food sensitivities are partially affected by intestinal permeability and leaky gut syndrome. So the more that gut healing can take place and that leaky gut is resolved, the more that sensitivities will subside over time. And it's a slow process, but I do think that's possible.
Thank you.
Yep.
Hi. What about cooking your food? So if you're cooking your yams and your beet greens, how much phytonutrients are you missing?
So with a lot of foods like sweet potatoes and beets, like you mentioned, I mean, you're not really losing too much with cooking. So it all depends how you're cooking the food. So for example, if you're boiling sweet potatoes and then throwing away the water, that's probably not a good way to do it, or boiling anything, because a lot of the nutrients are lost in the cooking water. So steaming is a very healthy way to cook, roasting. But if you're steaming or cooking in a healthy way, you know, beets or sweet potatoes, you're not really losing a lot of the nutrients.
Hi, my name is Angeles, and I have a huge resistance to bitter greens.
Okay.
And so when I saw you like having those beets, I was like wanting to puke when I saw like all the greens on the whole screen. So, but I do like to cook, and I eat a lot of vegetables, but I'm fearing, because I have methylation issues, I want to increase my green intake. And how do I do that without just eating salads and kale? I feel like that's like might be limiting my nutritional base. I don't know if you have any recommendations.
Do you like organ meats?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Okay.
I love rabbit liver and kidneys and all that stuff.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, I mean, I think actually organ meats and liver in particular, that's probably the most nutrient-dense food that's out there. So if you're incorporating that, you know, very regularly and as a big part of your diet, I think you could get away with, you know, maybe less of the greens and finding vegetables that you still enjoy to eat.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yeah. So we'll take one last question. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to follow up. My name is Stephen. I'm going to follow up the cooking question with how quickly do the micronutrients and phytonutrients break down? Do you have to get your vegetables, you know, fresh and quickly cook them, or if you keep them for a week, will they lose a lot of their nutritional value? Mm-hmm. And also, in reference to the sourcing of spices, is it better to get the, you know, the bulk ingredients and grind them yourself than get the, you know, the spices in a store or some place where they're already pre-ground?
Yeah, those are great questions. So just for spices, I think it is preferable to get the whole spices and then grind them rather than storing already ground spices, because they lose their nutrients a lot faster. So, for example, you know, allspice or black pepper, whatever spice you can keep whole and then grind in small quantities, that's definitely preferable. In terms of the shelf life issue, it depends on the vegetable. So a lot of root crops, like potatoes, so have a very long shelf life. Like we saw in The Martian. And then we see The Martian. You can actually live on potatoes. But anyway, I digress. So root vegetables have a pretty long shelf life, so you don't have to cook them right away. But leafy greens, and other green vegetables have a much shorter shorter shelf life. So in general, you want to go through those, those much faster. And if you are doing the lettuce wounding, which I talked about, that does accelerate their breakdown. So if you have the lettuce after wounding within 24 hours, that's probably optimal. But in general, yeah, the root vegetables will last a long time. So thanks, everyone. I want to mention that we are going to be on Twitter. If you want to tweet about it, use the hashtag UCSFPaleo. And then for the panel at the end of the day, we'll take questions on Twitter as well. So feel free to tweet or post on social media. So I'm going to turn it back to Karen.